Hello everyone, and in today's video is going to be a little different. I'm going to show you some of the tools that I use for soldering, and this is not the end all tools that you need to have. These are the tools I use, and if I'm going to show you or tell you why I've selected these tools. And a lot of it is mostly maybe because of budgetary concerns. Some of them is because of the quality, and some of it is maybe nice to have, and some of it might be is necessary to have. And it also depends on the type of soldering you're doing. So for example, you might be doing only through-hole soldering, or if you're doing surface mount soldering, and the tools that I have are not well suited for BGA type of soldering. So and I've not really done any BGA soldering yet, but I'm just going to show you some of the essential tools that I firmly believe that can help you, to better your soldering skills, or tools that are essential if you want to conduct, some good soldering. All right. So for through-hole mounts, I'm going to show you the soldering station later that I have, the soldering station and the hot air station. But like on the table, the tools that you might want to have. So this is a suction thing. So for example, when you want to desolder, say, through-hole devices, all you do is heat the solder, you put the solder in, and then you suck it out. It's a very handy tool, especially when you want to, if you made a mistake and you want to desolder some parts of your components. This is a nice handy tool to have. All right, this is when you have a soldering iron, for example, over here, and at times the solder gets stuck onto the iron, and if you just have a normal soldering thing where you just put water to clean it off, is not very effective. So this is a handy tool to have, where when you put the soldering, when it's hot and you have solder paste and you want to remove it completely from the soldering tip, this inserting into this this wire mesh kind of a thing is quite handy. It's quite effective, at least to clean out any solder that might be present on the solder tip that you want to remove. So yeah, this is a nice little handy tool, and some soldering stations come with it, and sometimes you need to buy it as an add-on. Mine did not come, so I had to buy this as an add-on. The product is the AOYUE. I think I got this from either DigiKey or Amazon. I'm not. The links of all the products will be below in this video. Now, when you're doing through holes, especially through hole soldering, this is a standard soldering, solder joint, as and I'm not too sure what's the millimeter, but if you're just doing any normal soldering, you would want to have the solder wire. And I do believe it's got some flux in here, but it's great for doing, especially through hole soldering. You literally, put your solder wire onto the pin, put your soldering iron onto it, and it's an easy way to solder, especially through hole components. This is too thick for surface mount devices, so for that you would need something smaller. So this is a 0.2 millimeter in diameter, and these are very thin, extremely thin. As you can see, they are like super thin, and you would need this because the components themselves are so small. And if you want to solder using just do-it-yourself soldering with your hand, you would need these wires to be extremely thin, and that's where these 0.2 millimeter or even smaller would be useful for to solder mount devices. Another handy tool that I have are the wicks, Flux. So this is a rosin paste flux. I'm not opened this yet. I've just seen reviews on Amazon and other places, so I bought this. I've used this. Is from Chipquick. It's quite. I mean, it's a solder flux. It's very, especially when you're doing surface mount device and you want the solder to flow properly onto the pads. Putting flux on your PCB before soldering allows the solder paste to flow onto the pad, so it makes the soldering task much easier. And without it, I've tried soldering without the flux, and it's generally very difficult, especially when the components are too small and the pads are everything is in millimeter. This helps you minimize the errors, minimize burning your devices and components, because it heats the solder and the solder is immediately in place where it's supposed to be. It's also great for removing solder bridges in case when you solder and the components short circuit. Wicks help you doing that. So I have 2 products. I'm not opened this yet, so I can't really give you a review. It's fine. It does the job kind of a thing. So this is the Chipquik CQ4300, 2 ounce, and this is the rosin paste by SRA, Flux number 135. This is the solder wick. If you want to desolder or remove solder from a component, this wick is a very handy tool to remove stuff, remove solder. So when you heat the solder and you want to absorb the solder paste, this tool, this wick basically, for example, you can place this on the soldering joint itself, put your soldering iron. You can put your soldering iron and then just place it on the device, and it will start to suck all the solder paste onto it. So that's why it's a handy tool to have. And you will make mistakes for whatever be it. Maybe it's because the solder did not solder properly and there's a short circuit, or you want to desolder, maybe because you placed the component wrong. It's a tool basically if you have made a mistake, or you just want to remove a component because the circuit is bad but the component is still workable. You would want to have the solder wick. Pair of tweezers, very important. This is from WATER. It's a good soldering tip tweezer. I think I got this from SparkFun if I'm not mistaken. It's such a handy tool. Especially when you place a component onto a PCB and you want to align it. I'll give you an example. Say we have this. You have a old PCB over here. Yeah, you have this old PCB. This is a broken JTAG pin. But if you want to solder it, this tweezer allows you to put some wicks onto it, and then you want to align it. Or if you're aligning, you say a quad flat processor on this, and the alignment needs to be perfect. This tool helps you nudge. Not only to pick things up, but mostly to nudge and put them in place. This is a very handy tool. I wouldn't use this to pick certain components because some of the components, the legs or the leads, the leads that come out of it are so delicate that even if you apply a little force, you can bend them. So this is not a good way to pick components. This is a great way to nudge them into place. And if you want to pick them up, I highly recommend using something called as the vacuum. It's a vacuum thing, a vacuum suction thing. So for example, I have a quad flat thing. It helps me pick it up. So this is another handy tool. I got this from DigiKey. It's not going to do the same work as a vacuum suction pump because it doesn't have a pump pulling in onto it. But for a hand tool, and if I just want to take this chip and just place it where I want to and just leave it, for that it'll last for at least for 5 seconds or 5 to 10 seconds. It's a very handy tool, and then you use the tweezer to nudge it in place. Now this clearly is not the right chip for this footprint, but you get the point. So this is a very handy tool. It picks it up. It's quite good. It lasts for 5 to 10 seconds before it falls down, which is enough for me to take it from point A, place it in point B, and and release it. I don't really need to do much with it, but yeah, it is time bound if you want to say. But it's an effective tool. It has different tips. It comes with 3 different tips or 4 different tips. One is already mounted and 3 additional. So it's a handy tool to pick and place, and depending on the size of your chip, you can replace the heads. So yeah, this is a Chipquik tip cleaner. So sometimes you want your soldering iron to you want to clean it, and it sometimes can have it might be dirty, it might have solder on it, and it might have some stains on it. So this tip thinner is a great way to clean your tip. I've found it to be pretty pretty effective. It does the job, especially before soldering. You don't know what's stuck on it. You want to clean it up. You put a little bit of the tip thinner, and you clean it up, and it's good to go. So it's a handy tool. It's not a must-have, but it's good to have kind of a thing. All right, so let's get this guy out of the place. All right. Another thing that I have over here is the is another Flux No Clean Liquid by Chipquik. It's more like a pen kind of a thing, and yeah, you just basically spray it onto the pads like a pen. I'm not too sure which one is more effective. It depends on the use case. Sometimes this is more effective because you can put a lot more. Sometimes this can be effective and it's you have a very tight joint and you want to desolder, or there's not much space. This could be handy. So it depends on what you want. Depends on your use case. Though I generally feel like these are a little bit more effective at doing the job, whereas this can be effective when you are restricted or you don't have much space to work around, because there might be some sockets, or you're doing some rework and there's not much sockets, and there are things that do not allow you to just spread the wicks very easily. This can be very handy, but for the most part they both are equally good to do the job. Though point to note is that I have found this to create a lot more solder bridges than this when I'm soldering stuff. So but it's also it could be various other factors, maybe technique, or the or what I'm trying to solder is just the footprint is not good enough, or yeah, it could be various other reasons. All right, so another thing to have when you're soldering is to have, this is known as the third hand. It's basically a magnifying glass, and it's got some grippers over here to to basically put your to put your breadboard in here, and then you can do some soldering with with this magnifying glass. It's not the best tool, but if you're looking for something inexpensive that that helps you magnify and see certain things clearly, this is very handy. You can get this from Amazon or eBay. It's not a must-have, but it's a very useful tool. Sometimes I just use this to just see if I've soldered certain things properly. Now there are better tools out there in the market, but for the space if I'm space constrained or budget constrained, this can be a nice handy tool to have. Yeah. Another thing when you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with components that are very small like this, you don't want to touch it. You might have some static charge, and you might start and it might blow up, or cause some problems to these chips. So you want to handle them with care. So for that we have an ESD mat, which is a nice, I got this from SparkFun. I think it's a pretty decent high quality mat. I don't know, but it's not too expensive. It does the job. It looks nice. It goes well on my table, and I found it to be pretty convenient. I kind of feel like it's doing its job. It's got few sockets on the top, but it's got some small little things where you can put certain components. So it's got a nice little rack, as you may want to call it. And yeah, I've kept some stuff over here, but it's a nice handy tool to have on your table. It's pretty small. It's the size of my laptop width, literally, little, maybe slightly bigger, or almost the same size, and it just fits well on the table. It's a nice little tool. All right, so now we'll move on to the actual components that do the soldering. So what we have over here is my soldering station. This is the soldering thing that comes with the soldering station. And what we have over here is, let me unplug this guy. All right. So I'm just going to unplug a little bit of this just to see what it is. Okay, so this is from YIHU. It's a Chinese brand. I think I got this from eBay. I got this around 6-7 years ago, and it still works. So it's a pretty good tool, soldering station, and it gives you the temperature range. This does not come with the hot air iron, so you would have to buy an additional if you want. And nowadays, I think most of these devices come with a hot air iron and a soldering station and a soldering rod. But I think it's a pretty robust build. It's very small. I mean, it fits literally on my palm. It's a small little gadget. It's you need it to be temperature controlled when you're doing things like surface mount soldering. Temperature control, I mean, you really need to have temperature control. You can't have a static number because sometimes you need a lot more heat, and sometimes you need to have that ability to control the heat based on what you're soldering. I'm not too sure how accurate the reading is, but at least it's variable, so you can judge and gauge based on whether it's too hot or whether it's too cold, and then you can make the adjustments. So it's a nice little knob. I found it to be pretty. It's done the job for me. And when you buy this, generally when you buy most soldering stations, you'll also get different soldering tips, and they come in a small little bag. The ones that I use, there's things that are flat, which helps in soldering, especially this quad. If you want to solder like things which a component like this where you have all these quad pins, it's nice to take the soldering iron and basically solder them all on it one at a time. So the thicker the flat one helps in soldering a lot of pins at the same time. Or you can go very, very small based on what they've given. Some of them I've not used at all. Some of them I've used more than like this is the one that I've used a lot because it's very small. It's thin, and yeah, especially when you're doing surface mount devices, you want your tip to be very, very small if you're just soldering one certain component. This is also a small pointed thin, but it's I think a little thicker than what I have over here. But the point is, when you buy a soldering iron, they come with different tips, and based on your application, you can select the one that's most appropriate. So yeah, that's my soldering station. Now, when you're doing certain surface mount devices, you also want to have a hot air station. So let's have a look at the hot air station. All right, let me get all of this cleared from the table. So this is the hot air station that I have. This is by SparkFun. It's the it's a bulky little device. It's got you can control the flow of the air as well as you can control the. Let me adjust this a little bit. Yeah, you can control the flow of the air, and you can also control the temperature. So, and then this is the power switch, and this will give you the readings of the temperature. It is a big device, and then this is the blowing the heat gun, as you want to call it. Yeah, and they do come with two tips. One is the one that's already attached, and one is a bigger one, or vice versa, whichever one is attached. So you got a bigger nozzle, and then you have a smaller nozzle. So this is a handy tool, especially when you're doing surface mount device soldering, and you want to do some rework, or if you want to solder components. This is a handy tool to have, primarily if you're doing surface mount soldering. So yeah. So this is a nice little handy tool. I've used it especially for some desoldering work. It's a new tool that I bought. I've been able to do it a lot with my soldering iron, but sometimes it becomes inconvenient, or it's a little too slow, whereas a hot air can literally warm up a larger area at a time, and it makes the process cleaner and can be even smoother. And last but not the least is the oven. So this is the hot air oven, or the electronic hot plate, however you want to call it. I got this from eBay. It was a pretty reasonable, cheap, thing, and I've had this for almost 10 years right now, or a little less than that. It's a very handy tool, especially when you're doing surface mount devices and you have a soldering stencil. This is just perfect. It's got some temperature control in here. You put the temperature on, it retains the heat for a pretty long time. So you take this device, and then you can take a component like this, you place it on it, and it's very good if you have soldering stencils, and if you have components that are very small, it's highly recommend you use a soldering stencil, and then you can put the soldering stencil, put all your solder paste on it, and then you put this on this oven, and then it will heat the solder paste and make the component, place the component. It will place the component onto the pads, and if there's any solder bridge, then you can use the Flux or the solder wick to remove any solder bridges. So this is a very handy tool, especially when you're doing surface mount soldering. I found it to be, the more complicated the devices, hand soldering every component can be a little too much. This will uniformly heat the plate, though it may or may not necessarily uniformly heat. Sometimes the center part might be a lot more hotter than the end part. But for overall, the heat is well distributed if you give it some time. And it'll solder all the components in one go. This is the closest to having, say, a more commercially or an automatic assembly unit. So this is a nice thing to have in a do-it-yourself home environment. Yeah. And for this, you would need a solder paste, which I've been using. Which you can, a solder paste it's not like a soldering. It's not like the solder wire. It's a solder paste where you it's literally a paste, and you put that paste onto a stencil, or depending on how you want to inject it. Sometimes it comes in a syringe, but that's a necessary tool if you're using the oven. And that's pretty much it for my soldering station, or my soldering equipment. In one of the next videos, I'll show you all about the different types of tools that are needed for performing some electronic electronic testing, for example, logic analyzers and oscilloscopes and stuff like that. But yeah, soldering station is a nice handy tool if you want to prototype quickly, create and build products, and troubleshoot, especially at the hardware level. This is what I have. If you like these videos, please subscribe or like this video. And until then, and until the next video, see you then. Thank you.